you sound like a really seasoned veteran in this area. But tell us a bit about how you got to this point. What's your background?
That's geez, where should I start?
At the very beginning.
I think it's probably a good idea to maybe even start with my upbringing. Yeah, okay. Because my grandmother was actually the HR director at the Housing and Urban Development in New York City, and that is sort of I don't really know what the equivalent would be, but it's people that are working for affordable housing for most people. So I think that's where sort of the roots of my social conscience started. My father was a big guy in Drug Enforcement Administration, so that was also social justice. I'm not quite sure what precisely that was, but it was this need to take care of other people, yeah, this need to help other people. And then my mother, she was absolutely bananas about getting people to vote. My family is very mixed, but for African Americans in the 60s, having lived through that and having the situation where people aren't taking responsibility for their own lives drove her bananas. I mean, she really got to the point where she would drive people crazy. Have you registered? Have you gone? Do you want me to drive you? She was always active in the voting.
So it's no wonder that you would grow up with such a conscious,
Absolutely not, but it takes a while to develop.
Yeah.
Because my career was such that I, very typical American, very very good at school, always got the best grades, always very little too concerned with getting straight A's. Excelled, took my MBA. I lived in Norway. I'm American, but I lived here for 30 years, and I had a very successful international career. Within telecommunications and also defense communications, and I think I was a little lucky because I was a woman at the time of when it was cool to be a woman. So but in Norway it's been a little exceptional, sitting on boards and you get all this attention that you're almost a little bit this is a little bit over
to Norway though?
That's
the short version.
I met a Norwegian in a bar.
That
was very short. But I think my path, and it was actually interesting listening to you, it was quite similar because when I was working in the private sector, I was making lots of money, very international, lived overseas, it really wasn't much I hadn't accomplished. I had big departments that I was responsible for. But it was all focused on profits, it was all, and I got to be so good at manipulating my budget. So I maxed out of my budget every year for 4 years, and then it's kind of like, well, this isn't fun. Where's the purpose with what I'm doing? And then I was in defense communications, and also I think, when Iran war hit, I also started to ask, sort of bigger questions. What is my role in this war? But my glimpse came because I was chairman of a women's group. It was called Association of International Professional Businesswomen. And there was this woman that basically changed my life. Am I talking too much? Because I haven't stopped. No, this is one question. That's also
if someone will give us the wind up, will they?
Yeah, that was kind of typical me. And a woman came up when I was chairman of this organization for women. I think we had 200 members, and she said, "What's the status of international or immigrant women in Norway?" And mind you, this was how old was my son? This must have been 1994, And I just looked at her and I said, "That's a really good question. I have no idea." But in typical Lisa style, I said, "Okay, we got to make this into a project. I got to figure this out, I talked to somebody else and they said, well, make a project about it, write it down on paper, figure out how you can figure it out, that turned out to be a huge project called Hidden Assets, where we ended up getting a researcher and finding out what the status for immigrant women was, and it wasn't very surprising. It was pretty not so good. And that was my first little inkling. Like, wow, this is something I like. It had to do with women, it had to do with trying to find inequalities and trying to propose things to concretely do. And then I started what was called the Top 10, because then I got this idea, okay, I can find a social problem, do a project around it, find funding and financing, and just do it and make a difference that way. I was the director at Tallest at the same time, but I said, screw that, this will be on my free time. So I did that, and that became a tremendous success. So what we did was we basically just found immigrant women, asked them to apply. We got a jury, an independent jury, that chose them based on different criteria. They had to be women that had immigrated to Norway, and they had to show how they overcame barriers. Yeah? And the reason the government loved this project, because we were funded and on the state budget for 10 years, was because I was looking at what works. I was looking at the positive. Yeah? But that's when after I saw how amazingly successful this was, and I was not in one of the articles. It was all about the women. It wasn't about me. But that's when I realized that I have a talent here, and I have a passion. Yeah? And again, it does something to you when you realize it's not going to work at the office for defense. Communications. I could see the difference I was making for Norwegians. Because we had I don't know. Did anyone see the cover of Dagbladet? Probably not. I'm probably the only one that remembers. Sarah, don't you remember? There was pictures of 10 immigrant women with the title that said, here are the the most successful immigrant women, and this is how they overcame, and this is how they became successful. I mean, it just gives me goosebumps to think, what we were doing is bringing out the positive stories on immigration, because immigration and integration is always a challenge. Yeah. So that was really the beginning of the end of my professional life.
So then where did you go? Because maybe we could explain to the audience.
I can pivot into what I'm doing now, because that was a long time.
Fantastic.
So what I did was quit my job, realized that this was not where I wanted to be. I didn't go straight into being a social entrepreneur. I took a sort of sideway into integration and diversity directorate, where I was responsible for all the immigration and integration programs there, where I shortly found out this is not for me. I am not a bureaucrat, and I cannot take all these rules. But I realized this is where I want to be, and I want to be on the other side of the table. So I left, and I took my project Top 10, and I said, okay, I'm going to start a portfolio, and basically start my own little NGO, where I just make different projects. Because I knew what I was good at from the private sector was looking at those social problems through a unique lens, and then making a project around it, getting the funding, financing, and just doing it.
And was that funding, financing coming from the government, or was that coming from private sources?
Mainly the government. Right. After a while, and especially working in the public sector, I got to be quite good at knowing where the money was. Which tilskuddsordning. Hva har jeg hørt det? Tilskudd. Help. English? Grants. Thank you, Sarah. Grant possibilities there are, and also trying to get some corporate sponsorship. So I had so much fun. So it was almost like I retired and just started to do anything I wanted to do. So I had Top 10, then I did an art exhibit with immigrant artists. I was very heavy in the Somali community because they really are very disadvantaged. I did a Nordic Somali Youth Summit for the kids. I did diversity charter to help companies become more diverse. I became more of an expert on diversity, and I became really an advocate. I became passionate about projects, but I got really kind of tired because I was doing project after project after project, and everyone's just like, can't you focus on one thing, Lisa? Do you have to do 5?
Are you a FOMO girl? Do you guys know what FOMO is?
Absolutely not.
Fear of missing out? You don't have that term here? Yeah. So I know I'm very much a FOMO girl, so maybe you're a FOMO girl too.
Yeah, maybe.
So what is it? So so you've had that history, and is that what you're still doing now?
No, because there was one project that was a mentor program that I did in the Nordic Somali Youth Summit that it just shook me. It was a simple pilot for Somali kids, for business guys. Yeah, we matched them together, did a regular mentor program. I've done that so many times. But when I heard the stories from the Somali kids, at least that was the first time I was in an office building. I'm like, say what? It's the first time I've talked to a white man. What? Wow. The advice I got from him was like from the inside. I was like, you're kidding me,
something you just take for granted so easily.
But then to listen to the mentors and saying, I've never touched a Somali person. I'm like, give me a break. I've never been to Grönland. I've never eaten some. So I was like, this is just too amazing. I've got to scale it up. And I used a long time to try to figure out how to make it unique, because the mentor program in itself is nothing unique. And 2 years later, I started Catalyst, which is a mentor program, which our vision I loved is building a more inclusive society, one relationship at a time.
Gorgeous. So you're doing that with Just in Norway or
just in Norway?
Somalia? Or
just in Norway so far, and it's with immigrant kids, and we're now in 5 different, I think we're in 10 different municipalities, in 5 different fylke, which I don't really know how to say that, but that's like counties. That's a county, and then municipality.
Right. Okay.
We've reached about 450 kids.
Wow.
We've done 220 different mentor connections. And it's just absolutely, it is so gratifying.
I can see that with what you're saying. Maybe you could share with us, like, what's been your biggest challenge in the work that you're doing?
I think it's, within the mentor program, it was really working to find out how to make it unique. And ours is based on appreciative inquiry, which is positive psychology. And that has given us a sort of a sweet sauce that is, and we've gotten to be very good at it, in how we build conversations that really matter and help the mentors and make a win-win on both sides. Yeah? But it is so hard to start as a social entrepreneur because I got so many no's. So you've really got to have a very
thick skin.
I was going to say hard skin, thick skin.
Yes.
And always have a side gig. That's what somebody told me. So I always did a little consulting on the side, or did speeches on the side, or to make more, just to make sure you're making it.
And the other part too is, like, we're going through this ourselves. Is the strongest social enterprise model you can have is a blended model. Have you guys heard of that? So you have multiple income streams. And you're not relying on, I suppose that makes sense in any business, right? But even more so with getting impact, Like, we've just started employing a social enterprise to do our fulfillment, and they employ people with disabilities. So now we can measure impact with, that organisation as well as just the kids that we're helping. So, when you're looking at your business model, you want to look at as many ways you can create this impact. Where are you going now then with the business?
Well, we've been exceptionally lucky, and one thing that I really want to underline, I think when you find what you're meant to do and your sweet sauce, it's amazing how things just happen. Yeah. Because I met, just by happenstance, a woman a year and a half ago at a cafe that I just liked, and I liked her so much. I said, "What do you do?" And she said, "Oh, I'm a researcher and I'm really looking for a social entrepreneur that does mentoring." I was like, "You are out of your mind." Yeah. She had a digital platform. She was a researcher at Oslo University Hospital. They had researched this platform, and they were looking for someone with a mentor program to use their methodology to test to see if it would have the same positive outcomes.
Right.
So now I have a tech startup in addition to the mentor program, which is my social enterprise. So we're going digital. And not only is it, to augment the mentor program that we do, but also within the health sector. Yes. So we have, we're having a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
And we're working on going nationally in Norway, and then also hopefully to Sweden by the first quarter of next year. And then...
Wow, the world's next.
I don't know, but yeah, why not?
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Well, look, I'd like to at this stage throw it open to the audience. Are there any questions for Lisa on so far what she's shared with us? Does anyone have any questions or observations, comments that they'd like to make? Yes, up the back there.
I wondered, how do you use appreciative inquiry?
Yeah, oh, thank you. I love it. Actually, we try to use it throughout the whole program, because appreciative inquiry is really trying to help people have positive questions. Inquiry is questioning. Yeah. So when we teach the mentors, we have a meeting that we have just with the kids and just with the mentors before they meet each other. And that's when we really talk about what is appreciative inquiry, how we can use the questioning. And then the first meeting that they have is we do what is called mestringshistoria, which I have no idea how to translate, but it starts things on a positive note, and they pick out the strengths of each other. And then they've got each meeting is very structured, where we give them a little bit of a script, all based on positive psychology, on the conversations that we want them to have and how they want to help the kids in sort of a roadmap to success. So by the end of their mentor relationship, the kids have a roadmap with lots of positive psychology. It's not completely well described, but you get the gist. Yeah. And we do a little bit of follow-up with the mentors too on how to use positive psychology, and they all love it. So they've actually asked us to come back and give speeches and help them bring it into the organization. So.
Well, in Australia, I'm seeing a lot of businesses now putting mentors together with either, underprivileged kids or,
Absolutely.
kids like I've been talking about, the leaders who want to become social entrepreneurs. And I see a huge space. I don't know if this is the case in Norway, but in Australia, it's a really huge area. There's a lot of people in corporates because they're feeling like, they're questioning their purpose. And so they want to actually work in charities or social enterprises. And so there's a lot of people starting recruitment type businesses where they're going to, they're connecting those sorts of people with the charities or with the social enterprises. And that's, I know in the UK too, it's very big too at the moment.
That's actually one of our biggest growing segment is our corporate segment. We've done one corporate program where we've gone to this one company and they gave us 10 employees and we went to the local school and got 10 kids and had the mentor program. And it's corporate social responsibility, it's sustainability. So, I gave them extra training on diversity and appreciative inquiry, and they've now got a 3-year contract and they want to take us to Sweden because they want us to do the same in their subsidiary. So I totally agree. There's a big space for employees that want to give. Yeah.
And it's also because, the biggest problem with a lot of the work that we're doing is the measurement. Everyone's struggling with how do you measure the social impact, right? Especially the investors. And so they can measure volunteer time.
Yeah.
That's a very easy thing to measure. So this is, I think, one of the reasons why, and also with corporates, they don't like giving cash necessarily, but they can give their people. Yeah. And I don't know if that happens here, but in our country we have a lot of businesses where they will give their employees, 1 week to go and work in whatever charity, social enterprise that they want to work in, and those programs have been really successful. And what's happening is the employees are saying we want more, we want to do a lot more, so it works well for both sides. So
we're actually very well known for our very good impact measurements. Very nerdy about that. Being a social entrepreneur for 10 years and also as a businesswoman, because I like that return on investment. I understand why this is important to be able to communicate the value of what you're doing. So we have, since our program is mainly focused on keeping kids in school and preventing dropout, and researchers say to do that you need to increase the self-esteem for kids. We use the oldest self-esteem measurement. We measure the kids before and after the program. When we've gone into some groups that are enslig mindreårig, unaccompanied minor refugee children, then we use another index called Hope for Futures, where we're measuring that we're giving them hope. And absolutely all programs we've seen an increase in our indicators. And it gives us something to talk about and cross-compare and measure. And I think that's where social entrepreneurship has come quite far in developing good impact tools. And I'm hoping more municipalities use it and more funders start to demand it.
Yes.
Because it's important that you can communicate truthfully.
Sure.
And also, have you done the theory of change? Where
yes. I haven't heard of what you talked about earlier. What was the gentleman that expression? I hadn't heard of that one. The question
appreciative inquiry. It's really, that's more like positive psychology.
Okay.
That's becoming quite popular, at least in the States, and more organizations are trying to use it. But the theory of change I highly recommend. And I do this because you start with the vision, the outcomes, the
lean
inputs,
business
outputs.
canvas model, right? And then
it's a little bit of
theory
that,
of change, and then I'm sure. Yes, question.
Regarding that, specifically, we're also trying to start a mini system program. We haven't started yet, so it's kind of like the first step. But do you have a way that you actually verify the validity of that research?
We are so lucky because we're actually got a postdoc from Røkon Center that's going to be starting to look at our program, her PhD, to do a PhD sort of controlled study that will measure the effect of our program. So, but otherwise, we do our own. We have a survey. That we analyze before and after for both immigrant kids and also the unaccompanied minors, if I understood you right. That's what you meant,
yeah? I guess maybe you use percentage, right? Do you also use p-value?
No.
No.
We're that advanced, we're not.
No,
But
so then
once the
maybe you tell
postdoc,
it-
yeah, but once the postdoc does it, then we'll, I mean, and that'll be a 3-year study.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know,
The difficulty too, and the difficulty too in measuring some of these things is you need a certain amount of time to pass to be able to measure it too, right?
and also a control
Yeah.
group, so you need the
Yeah.
group that doesn't have the intervention and the ones that does have the intervention. So we're so excited about that postdoc that will start in the fall.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Laura?
Yeah, just to tag on to that, like, you know, social impact measurement is really important. There's no clear science to prove like this is the way to do it, everyone should do it this way. Because putting a numerical value on a feeling or a sense of hope, a sense of confidence is really hard to do unless you just compare it based on, you know, people giving their own you know, self-reporting. But not to discourage people from doing it though. You need to start somewhere. And actually, in business, a lot of the time investments come from just you know, really good personalities, ways of communicating well, and a kind of a prediction of what this means. You know, what value could increase with time, and it's really hard for social entrepreneurs to have to deal with both environments. You know, both the public sector that wants to see, you know, reduce crime and reduce the, you know, school dropout rate, and you have to prove to investors that this is a profitable enterprise. So it is a really big challenge, and not to kind of scare people off, but in terms of the reliability, if it's transparent and you're clear as how you got to that conclusion, I think that's valid enough. If not, you don't need to be an academic, I feel, to prove what social change you've managed to create. I think the stories of
It's a really good point, yeah. With our shoes, we can measure it with how many shoes we've given, but that's just a numeric assessment, as you've said. But, you know, meeting these children that we've given the shoes to, and to have a child come up to you and say, oh my God, you've made so much difference to my life. They suddenly have self-worth. They have, you know, self-esteem that they never had because a total stranger has done something for them. How do you measure that? You know, it's like you talked about the hope factor, right? So it's a very challenging quandary, isn't it, to measure that?
One thing that we're hoping to do, because we've been doing this now for almost 4 years, or just about 4 years in December, that we now have a database of kids. So we're hoping that we can, I mean, if kids answer, which is always basically the problem, you know, are you in school? Yeah. Have you gotten a job? You know, are you in a relevant job? Yeah. We're looking to get into school programs, and then we'll have a tremendous amount of data, because we can see, are we improving their grades? Are we, you know, is improving truancy? So that I agree that you know, it's great, and we are focusing mainly on the qualitative type of indicators, because that's how we've done our theory for change. But it is super cool to think you can get to the more quantitative, because then I mean, we all should be on the state budget, because we're probably more effective than after school programs, you know. So that's the way to get there.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? No? Yes?
I'm quite interested in the percentage of grant to sales, and if that's changed over time, particularly as you said, because I know the model, but also Kathy, it'd be interesting to know and what profit. Do you have a business model that ensures profit goes back into the company, or do you have sales? There's two questions there.
Yeah.
You want, okay, well,
you go.
Okay, well, yeah, we're a PTY Ltd, so yeah, all the profit goes back. Oh, do you not have that here? Okay, it's basically a company limited by guarantee. Is that what you guys refer to it? Oh, okay. Well, you basically have a shareholder or shareholders, and you can decide how you distribute the profit. So it's just a company structure. It's really a PTY limited shareholding, you know. And so so it's, you know, just like running any other business. You have the overhead of the giving. When we're making the sales, we basically then take that back into the company to pay for, you know, the investment that's gone in. So it is a sustainable business model. It's not yet. We're paying down a huge investment every year. But then, you know, at the same time, we're now building other revenue streams because that's product-based. And I was having this conversation with Bjorn this morning that, you know, product is one of the hardest areas of business you can pick. So think carefully if you're going to do a social enterprise business, because so many people are doing product, because I know for me, I thought it was rather sexy and it would be fun, but it's one of the hardest areas of business you can do, and particularly running a social enterprise model. So this is another reason why we're also, my background is service, I know that, so you know, that's why I'm also looking at the service part of it as well, bringing in revenue streams from that. Yeah.
Mine is a little bit more complicated because I now have two companies. One is the association, and the association is the one that applies for funding, and we're bloody good at getting funding, I have to admit.
I'm going to have to come see you about that.
And we're growing. We now have 11 employees. I realized that this morning. I was like, oh my God, this is getting crazy. And there, the funding is mainly tilskudd or grants. And some sales to the communities. And so we're just getting into the point where the communities realize we don't want you to go. So we're selling a little bit directly, and we're working like bloody hell to get on the state budget.
But I would imagine if you work more with corporates, then you get an income stream coming from that, right? Where at the moment.
And the corporate part is what we put into the other company, which is Catalyst Technologies, that has the digital platform. And we might end up putting that back because it's growing so quickly. But what we're working on, and has anyone heard of the Plantagon model from Sweden? Okay, we have an association and a for-profit company. There's a model in Sweden whereby the association appoints one board member to the for-profit, and they try to sort of have their articles of association quite similar, because it's really important for me. I suddenly have a for-profit that I don't want to be, raped by investors. I want to make sure that for-profit, Catalyst Technologies, understands where it came from. So we've had one person that has been appointed from the association to here, and the association is actually going to own a portion of this for-profit. And we're now in discussion with boards of both companies to figure out how much. And this is a model that I really can stand by to present to people. That is a componentization model that gives not only bærekraft, what the hell? Sustainability back to the association, but also, and obviously some quite interesting funding and ownership stake over here, and at the same time keeps both companies moving in one direction.
It's interesting as we're looking at something like that too, so the foundation can take in grants, because we can't do any of that as a company. We can't get access to any grants, like this, any sort of funding that way. Because we're just being run like a traditional company. And so that way that's happening a lot now in Australia, and it's definitely happening a lot in the UK, right? From what I understand, Sarah?
The UK has more company structures created for social enterprises. So ownership is what distinguishes a social enterprise from a for-profit.
Exactly.
And so there should be no ownership. The community should own it, or the social issue. So there should be either an asset lock, so that any profits have to be reinvested
in the association. That's the way.
It's a company structure. So there's a CIC, or you have a charitable incorporated organization. So there's two structures.
But I think it's important to think structure last. think what's the word? Be clever and make sure you have the right organizational structure to get the funding in the beginning.
And are B Corps big here in Norway?
There's only one.
Oh, really? So does everyone understand the B Corp situation as well? Not well known here. Okay, because we have a lot of B Corps in Australia. So my understanding of that is that's the only world recognised method of certification now for a company, that you've got to answer 200 questions and you're audited every 2 years, and so that is a worldwide standard of a company that's ticking all the right boxes for being a social business.
Benefit Corporation is an American registration. It just protects, companies have shareholders, it protects the purpose of that company. So the shareholders the CEO, the directors working for the company can make an argument for reinvesting in the social purpose over making an extra profit. So.
Okay.
And it's really the only...
They can, absolutely.
So it's not the same as the company, the CIC in the UK? So.
No, they're for-profit companies, but my understanding is the only worldwide situation that's certified that way. There's nothing else, because this is why there's such a problem too in the whole social enterprise space, because every country has a different understanding of it. There's different rules governing structures and all sorts of things, and that's why there's so much confusion. Yeah.
And it's quite a new field in Norway too.
And there's a lot of competition. I think, and Sarah can attest to this, when I first started, we were one of the very few, and now there's just a lot, many more. And
why do you put that down to, why is there such a growth now in this space?
I think as I see it, there's been certain social problems that have really come to light, that aren't being covered by the private or the public sector. I think the refugee crisis in 2015 saw a plethora of social entrepreneurs that had good and bad intentions, and both serious and non-serious actors. And a lot of noise, and then and it's kind of hard to be a social entrepreneur when your problem is sort of in flux at the same time. So then the problem became probably less. So then there was a scrambling again. But I think there's an increasing awareness. I think the government, at least in Norway,
governments are kind of failing people all over the world, so people are reaching out to.
But I think the Norwegian government is also getting more and more interested in using social entrepreneurs. It's you see more politicians talking about it, promoting it, trying to find creative ways to get social entrepreneurs involved.
You guys are definitely, your government is definitely more supportive than our government.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have read this stat. Some of you here are entrepreneurs, not social entrepreneurs, is my understanding today, right? Is that right? Yeah. But there's a stat, have you seen that stat where they're saying businesses that start up, if you compare a normal startup business to a social mission business, there's 1/3 better success rate for those who have social causes, because as you know, starting up any business is tough in those first few years, right? But they're saying that those who actually are social businesses have 1/3 more success rate than those that don't.
Wow.
Yeah, which is great,
I like that.
to know that. Yeah.
And I think it's because it boils down to the passion, My employees I drive them nuts. I'm always working. I love what I do. I'm thinking of new ideas and what we can do. And if you're just focused on the profits, then I think your attention span is probably a lot shorter.
Well, Branson has said that, all right. That companies that are going to be the ones that succeed in the future are no longer the for-profit businesses that just are all about profit. It has to be purpose-based, So that's coming from someone who most people know and has been pretty successful. So I think that's really, thanks so much, Lisa. Unless anybody else has anything else that they want to ask, I think that's pretty much it, Laura.
Yeah. Just to mingle and get
so now we can just mingle and get to know each other.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Right here about